It was a bright morning, the kind where the sun seemed to warm everything it touched. She had already been up for hours, making breakfast for her child, packing lunches, and double-checking that everything was ready for the day ahead. Life had never been easy, but she had grown used to the balancing act of being a single mother and maintaining her career. She moved with a quiet determination, the kind of person who never asked for attention but commanded respect in the way she carried herself. Her child, sleepy-eyed but cheerful, clutched a small toy while waiting in the kitchen for breakfast. She smiled at them, trying to hide the tiredness that tugged at her shoulders. "Eat quickly," she said gently. "We don't want to be late." There was a rhythm to their mornings, a dance they had perfected over months. She had learned to manage the chaos, to anticipate every little obstacle that could slow them down, and yet she still found herself wishing for just a few more hours of rest each day. Once breakfast was finished and the lunches were packed, they headed out the door. The car was small but tidy, filled with the faint smell of coffee and the scent of freshly polished leather. She buckled the child in the back seat, making sure the straps were snug, her fingers brushing the soft fabric. "Ready for today?" she asked, trying to make the morning feel lighter than it actually was. The child nodded, a little smile forming on their lips, and she felt a small surge of warmth. In moments like these, the hard work felt worth it, and the stress faded into the background. She started the engine and pulled into the street. The city was waking up slowly, cars moving in neat lines, people hurrying to their destinations unaware of the small dramas unfolding behind closed doors in each vehicle. She kept her eyes on the road, her mind alert, always aware of the world around her. She had been trained to notice details others overlooked, to stay calm under pressure, to anticipate problems before they arrived. It was part of who she was, a skill that had kept her safe in countless situations. But on this ordinary day, nothing could have prepared her for what was about to happen. A few blocks down, she noticed a police car parked near an intersection. The officers inside seemed to be watching traffic carefully. She had no reason to worry, or so she thought. She signaled properly, slowed down as she approached the stop sign, and proceeded with caution. Everything seemed normal. Then, out of nowhere, she saw the flashing lights behind her. Her heart skipped a beat. She had done nothing wrong, or at least nothing that she thought warranted this kind of attention. She pulled over slowly, keeping her hands visible on the steering wheel, her child looking back at her with wide eyes. The officer approached the window, his face unreadable. "Good morning, ma'am," he said, his tone polite but firm. She nodded politely in return. "Good morning, officer." There was a pause, a moment where she felt the weight of his gaze. Something in his expression made her tighten her grip on the wheel. "Do you know why I pulled you over?" he asked. She shook her head. "No, officer, I don't. But I'll be happy to cooperate." She kept her voice calm, measured. Panic would only make things worse. She had learned long ago that staying composed was often the difference between safety and danger. The officer stepped closer, his notepad in hand. He asked for her license and registration, and she handed them over without hesitation. She kept her movements slow, deliberate, wanting to make sure he saw nothing that could be misinterpreted. Her child sat quietly, sensing the tension but not fully understanding it. She gave a small, reassuring smile, hoping to calm them as much as herself. The officer glanced at her documents, then back at her, his eyes narrowing slightly. She noticed the change in his demeanor, the shift from polite to suspicious. Something in his tone suggested he doubted her words, her calm, her very presence. "Do you know how fast you were going?" he asked. She shook her head again, keeping her tone respectful. "I'm sorry, officer. I don't think I was speeding. I was watching the signs carefully." He didn't reply immediately. Instead, he studied her, his expression hard to read. She could feel the tension rising, her instincts alert. Something about the situation felt wrong. Like the ordinary had suddenly become unpredictable. She stayed silent, letting him speak first, letting the rhythm of the encounter dictate her actions. Without warning, the situation escalated. The officer's voice raised, sharp and commanding, and suddenly she felt herself being told to step out of the car. Confused, she asked why, keeping her hands in plain view. Her child began to fidget, sensing that something serious was happening. The officer moved closer, his body language rigid, and she realized that this was no longer just a traffic stop. Something about the way he approached, the way he demanded compliance, suggested a misjudgment, a misunderstanding that had gone too far. She remained calm, her mind racing, thinking of every possible way to defuse the situation without risking harm to herself or her child. She stepped out of the car slowly, following his instructions, but her voice remained steady. "I'm cooperating, officer. Please tell me what the problem is." He gave a curt reply, one that was laced with tension and a hint of impatience. Other officers began to arrive, drawn by the radio call. She could see their faces, some curious, some skeptical. She realized she was being judged, not just for what she had done, but for who she was. The realization stung, but she pushed it aside. She had dealt with difficult people before, and she knew that her reaction now would determine the outcome of this encounter. The child, standing next to her, looked up with wide eyes, and she crouched slightly, placing a hand gently on their shoulder. "It's okay," she whispered. "Everything is going to be fine." Inside, her heart pounded. She could feel the officer's suspicion growing, and she knew that one wrong move could make the situation worse. But she also knew that panicking would help no one. She focused on her breathing, on the rhythm of the moment, on staying calm despite the fear that threatened to overwhelm her. The officers continued to question her, their voices overlapping, a cacophony of authority and doubt. She answered carefully, honestly, never raising her voice, never showing anger. She noticed the small details around her, the way the crowd gathered at a distance, the way her child clutched a small toy for comfort, the subtle cues that told her the situation could turn in an instant. Her training, her experience, and her instinct all came together in that moment, guiding her actions and helping her maintain control despite the chaos. Minutes passed, but they felt like hours. Every gesture, every word was scrutinized. She could feel the eyes of the officers on her, measuring her reactions, judging her presence. She reminded herself that she had handled more dangerous situations than this, though none involved her child. She stayed focused, aware that panic or anger could make things spiral out of control. She kept her hands visible, her voice calm, and her mind sharp, calculating the safest way to navigate the encounter without escalating it further. Suddenly, one officer's tone shifted, sharp and accusing. He suggested that she had been evasive, that her behavior was suspicious. She shook her head, maintaining composure. "I assure you, officer, I am not trying to be evasive. I am cooperating fully." Her words were calm but firm, a reminder that she was not someone to be underestimated. The child looked at her, eyes wide with worry, and she gave a small smile, reinforcing the message that they were safe, that she was in control. The officers hesitated, unsure how to proceed. They were reacting to their assumptions, to a split-second judgment, but she remained steady, grounded in her reality. She knew that one misstep could change everything, and she made a conscious effort to stay calm, to guide the encounter with patience and clarity. Her training had taught her to manage high-pressure situations, and she relied on those skills now, even though the stakes felt intensely personal. As the confrontation continued, she felt the eyes of the crowd on her. Some were recording, others simply watching, their expressions a mix of curiosity and concern. She remained composed, aware that her actions were being observed, that every movement could be interpreted in ways she did not intend. She focused on the most important things, keeping herself and her child safe, staying calm, and maintaining clarity in the face of growing tension. It was in these moments, when fear and uncertainty threatened to take over, that her inner strength shone through. She did not panic, she did not argue, and she did not let the situation overwhelm her. She stayed grounded, focused on each step, on each word, on each breath. She reminded herself that she was capable, that she had faced far greater challenges before, and that she would navigate this one as well. The morning sun had climbed higher, casting a golden glow over the street, but the warmth outside could not reach the tension inside the small car and on the sidewalk where she stood with her child. Her heart still raced, but her mind remained sharp. She knew that one wrong word, one sudden move, could turn a tense situation into something far more dangerous. She had always been aware of the unpredictability of life, but being judged so quickly, so unfairly in front of her child, cut deeper than any training had prepared her for. She wanted to shield them, to protect their innocence from the sharp edge of reality that seemed to surround them now. The officers around her were confused, their voices overlapping, each one speaking with authority yet unsure of the right approach. She noticed subtle shifts in their body language, one tapping on his notepad nervously, another shifting weight from one foot to the other, glancing at the other officers for guidance. It was clear they were reacting more to assumptions than facts. Her chest tightened, but she kept her breathing steady. She had faced dangerous situations before, and this felt like a smaller version of that world. Less visible danger, but a danger all the same. Her child's small hands clutching the seat of the car, watched silently, sensing the fear in the air. She crouched slightly to meet their gaze, keeping her tone soft yet firm. "It's okay," she said. "Just stay calm with me. Everything will be fine." The words were more for them than for herself. Inside, she was calculating every possible outcome, every potential misstep, and how to handle it with grace. Her training had taught her the importance of control, of clarity, and right now, clarity was everything. One of the officers stepped forward, a little more assertive this time. "Step back," he said sharply. "We need to check something." She nodded without argument, moving a few steps away from the car while keeping her child close. Every movement was deliberate, slow, visible, designed to show that she posed no threat. She could feel the tension in the air like static electricity, each officer waiting for something to happen, each expecting her to make the first mistake. But she had learned long ago that staying calm often diffused situations faster than anger or resistance ever could. The child clung to her hand as they stepped back. "Are we in trouble?" they asked quietly, eyes wide. She smiled gently, kneeling to bring herself down to their level. "No trouble," she said softly. "We're just waiting. That's all, see? Everything is okay. We're safe." Her words were soothing, and yet every fiber of her body remained alert, scanning the environment, noticing every subtle cue, every glance, every gesture. She had been trained to see what others missed, to anticipate danger before it became real, and she relied on that instinct now more than ever. She noticed a small crowd had gathered at a distance, some whispering, some filming on their phones. She could feel their eyes on her, judging, questioning, some curious, some worried. The weight of being watched made the moment heavier, but she didn't let it break her focus. Instead, she squared her shoulders, held her head high, and let her calm presence communicate confidence. She knew that panic, hesitation, or anger could escalate the situation further, and she refused to give that power to anyone else. The officers began questioning her again, their tone sharper this time, almost accusatory. They suggested she had been evasive, that her movements seemed suspicious, and that her calmness was unusual. She took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. "I am cooperating fully," she said. "I have done nothing wrong, and I am more than willing to provide any information you need." Her voice was steady, calm and firm, carrying the weight of someone who knew her rights, someone who understood how to navigate authority without fear. One officer shook his head, unconvinced. He gestured toward the car, suggesting they needed to search it. She knew this could become a flashpoint. She kept her hands visible, glanced at her child, and spoke again, calm but assertive. "I understand your concerns. I ask that this be done respectfully and safely. My child is here, and I want to make sure they remain unharmed." She could see the surprise in their faces at her composed, deliberate approach. Most people would have panicked, argued, or lost control. She chose control. Her child tugged slightly at her sleeve, whispering a question she didn't quite catch. She bent down again, brushing their hair back gently. "I'm right here," she said softly. "Stay close, stay calm. We will get through this together." The reassurance wasn't just for them. It was a reminder to herself. She couldn't afford distraction or fear. She had to remain present, aware, in charge of her reactions, even if she couldn't control the assumptions others had made about her. The officers signaled for her to step toward the sidewalk, away from the car. She complied slowly, deliberately, all the while keeping her child close. Her senses were heightened. She noticed a dog barking in the distance, a car horn blaring, a passerby stopping to watch. The world seemed to narrow down to a small circle. Her child, and the officers. Everything else faded. She focused on posture, tone, and gestures, aware that every small action could be misread. A junior officer approached hesitantly, notebook in hand. "Can you explain why you were speeding?" he asked. She shook her head. "I was not speeding," she replied. "I was following the posted limits. I am happy to clarify anything you need to verify that." The officer scribbled something in his notebook, then glanced at the senior officer. Confusion flashed across his face. She noticed it and used the moment to project calm confidence. One of the senior officers, growing impatient, raised his voice. "We need to make sure you are telling the truth. Step aside." She obeyed, walking slowly, deliberately, maintaining eye contact when appropriate, showing no sign of threat or evasion. She could feel the child's small hand gripping hers tightly, and she squeezed back gently, offering silent reassurance. Every step, every word was measured. She understood the power of calm, of authority that comes not from aggression but from composure. Minutes stretched on, though it felt like an eternity. The tension remained high. She noticed the officer who had approached her first was watching her intently, eyebrows furrowed, doubt lingering in his expression. She kept her stance open, relaxed yet ready to act if necessary. She was trained to remain calm under extreme pressure, to read situations like a map, to anticipate outcomes and control variables. But even with training, she couldn't ignore the unfairness of the assumptions being made simply because of her appearance and circumstance. Her mind worked quickly. She thought of all the ways this could go wrong and how to mitigate them. She had been in dangerous situations before, but never quite like this. Never while trying to protect a small child. Never while relying solely on words, gestures, and calm presence. The officer's suspicion was growing, the tension thickening. She reminded herself to breathe, to remain calm, to let logic guide her instead of anger or fear. Her child shifted slightly, looking up at her again. "Are they going to hurt us?" they asked softly, voice trembling. She knelt again, brushing a strand of hair from their forehead. "No one is going to hurt us," she said. "We are careful. We are calm. We will get through this, and I will make sure you are safe." Her words were steady, reassuring, and full of certainty. They believed her, and she drew strength from that belief. She could not falter. The crowd around them whispered, some moved closer, some took out phones. She noticed them but kept her focus inward on the child, on the officers, on the space around her. Each officer's expression revealed subtle clues: frustration, doubt, uncertainty. She understood that she had the upper hand if she could maintain composure. The moment called for patience and strategy, rather than confrontation. She controlled what she could: her words, her body, her emotions. She could not control the assumptions, the biases, or the misjudgments. One officer stepped back, speaking quietly into his radio. She watched him, noting the change. Something was shifting, though she did not yet know what. Her calmness, her deliberate behavior, and her refusal to escalate had introduced a pause, a moment of reflection in the officers' minds. They had expected panic or resistance, but she had offered none. The realization seemed to confuse them, leaving them uncertain about how to proceed. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. The child shifted again, anxious but trusting her completely. She bent down, spoke softly. "We are almost done here. Stay calm, stay close, and remember, nothing bad will happen as long as we stay calm." Her words were simple, direct, but carried the authority of someone who had faced far greater danger than this. She projected confidence and control, knowing that it was the key to keeping the situation from spiraling out of control. The officers continued their questions, slower now, less sharp, their uncertainty growing. She remained cooperative, never raising her voice, never showing frustration. Her calmness began to influence the situation subtly, and she noticed the senior officer exchanging glances with his colleagues. The tone of the encounter had shifted slightly. She was no longer just a subject of suspicion. She was a composed, authoritative presence that demanded respect. And through it all, she maintained the delicate balance, protecting her child, maintaining her own safety, and navigating the officer's increasing uncertainty. Every gesture, every word, every movement was deliberate, controlled, and calculated to prevent escalation. She had learned long ago that patience and composure were often more powerful than confrontation. She drew on that lesson now, using her presence as her shield, her mind as her guide, and her calm as her tool. The tension in the air had not eased, even as the officers slowed their questioning. Something about the situation had shifted, though it was subtle, almost imperceptible. She noticed it immediately. A slight hesitation in their voices, a pause in their gestures, a flicker of uncertainty in their eyes. It was as if her calm and deliberate presence had disrupted their assumptions. But she knew that hesitation could be dangerous too. People who were uncertain could act unpredictably. She stayed alert, her senses finely tuned, ready to respond at a moment's notice. Her child, still holding her hand, looked up at her with wide eyes. "Why are they staring at us like that?" they asked quietly, their voice barely above a whisper. She crouched slightly to meet their gaze, brushing a strand of hair from their forehead. "They are just trying to figure things out," she said softly. "Sometimes people get confused when things don't go the way they expect. But we know what's right, and that's what matters." Her words were simple, but they carried weight. She wanted her child to feel safe, to trust that the world could be navigated carefully and calmly, even when it seemed frightening. The senior officer, who had been pacing slightly behind the others, finally spoke up, his tone edged with authority but still cautious. "Ma'am, we need to know exactly who we're dealing with," he said. His words were measured, but there was an underlying tension that suggested he did not fully trust the answer he might receive. She knew this was the moment to be careful. One wrong word could trigger a misunderstanding that might spiral out of control. She nodded, keeping her voice calm and steady. "I understand completely, officer," she replied. "I will answer all questions truthfully and cooperate fully." Another officer stepped closer, clearly nervous. "We need to check your credentials," he said, holding out his hand. She paused for a moment, taking a slow breath. She had always preferred to keep her identity private, revealing it only when necessary. But now, with her child present and the situation escalating, there was no other choice. She reached into her bag and carefully pulled out a small badge and identification card. The child peeked over her shoulder, eyes wide, sensing the importance of what was happening. The officer's eyes widened almost instantly when he saw the badge. He took a small step back as if he had just realized something significant. The senior officer leaned forward, squinting at the credentials, and a sudden silence fell over the group. For a brief moment, the entire street seemed to pause. The only sounds, the faint hum of distant traffic and the soft rustle of leaves in the wind. She held the badge firmly but calmly, letting it speak for her while maintaining eye contact with the officers. "I am an FBI agent," she said clearly, her voice steady and firm. The words hung in the air, resonating with authority. The senior officer's posture shifted almost immediately, a mix of surprise and realization crossing his features. The other officers exchanged quick glances, their previous suspicion giving way to a mix of confusion and newfound respect. She did not raise her voice, did not demand recognition. She simply stated the truth, letting it stand on its own. Her child blinked, processing the revelation. "You're really important?" they asked in a small, awed voice. She smiled softly, crouching to their level. "I do important work," she said gently. "But right now, my most important job is making sure you are safe." She could feel a subtle shift in the officer's demeanor. Their eyes, once narrow with doubt, now softened slightly, and their movements became more cautious, less aggressive. The revelation had altered the dynamics completely, and she understood exactly why. The senior officer cleared his throat, his voice less sharp now. I had no idea," he said slowly. "We didn't know." She nodded once, acknowledging his words without judgment. "I understand," she replied calmly. "I know this looked unusual, but everything I have done here has been in cooperation with you. My child is with me, and safety is my priority. That has not changed." Her calm authority, combined with the weight of her credentials, shifted the energy of the encounter. Where there had been tension and suspicion, now there was cautious respect. Other officers began to relax slightly, their earlier aggression replaced by a tentative professionalism. One stepped back, lowering his notepad, while another adjusted his stance, no longer looming over her or her child. She remained composed, fully aware that her words, tone, and posture were shaping this delicate moment. Her mind worked quickly, thinking several steps ahead, aware that while the revelation had changed their perception, the situation was not yet fully resolved. Patience and calm were still essential. The child tugged lightly at her sleeve, whispering, "Are they going to be nice now?" She smiled softly, brushing a small hand along their arm. "Yes," she whispered back. "They understand now. We just have to stay calm and everything will be fine." Her words were reassuring, but also a reminder to herself. Maintaining composure was still key. Even with her credentials revealed, human reactions could be unpredictable. She focused on every small detail, watching for subtle signs of discomfort or lingering doubt in the officer's expressions. The senior officer finally stepped closer, speaking in a more measured tone. "Ma'am, now that we know who you are, we want to make sure we handle this correctly," he said. "We understand your cooperation and we appreciate it. We also want to ensure your child's safety." She nodded, appreciating the shift in tone. "Thank you," she said. That is all I ask. Let's handle this calmly and safely." Her words were simple, clear, and authoritative. She had learned long ago that clarity and communication often prevented misunderstandings from escalating into danger. The officers began to ask more practical questions now, focused on the situation itself rather than assumptions about her character or behavior. They checked the car, asked routine clarifying questions, and made sure her child was safe. She answered each one with calm precision, giving just enough information to satisfy their requirements without over-explaining. Every movement, every gesture was controlled and deliberate. She had turned a dangerous moment into one of clarity and order, simply by staying calm and composed under pressure. As the minutes passed, she noticed the subtle changes in the crowd as well. People who had been watching with curiosity or suspicion now murmured quietly, some nodding in recognition of her authority. A few stepped back, giving space, sensing that the encounter was no longer a spectacle of conflict but one of respect. She remained focused inward, not seeking attention or approval, but aware of the impact her composure had on everyone present. Her child leaned slightly into her, whispering, "You're really brave." She smiled, brushing a strand of hair back gently. "I have to be brave," she replied softly. "But you were brave too, just by staying calm with me. That's what matters most." The child's small hand tightened around hers, and she felt a surge of protective love and pride. She had navigated a moment that could have become frightening or dangerous, and now she had shown her child in real time how courage, composure, and truth could change everything. The officers began to communicate quietly among themselves, clearly discussing how to proceed without further escalating the situation. She remained patient, aware that the revelation of her identity had shifted the power dynamic but had not yet concluded the encounter. She continued to speak calmly, responding only when necessary, guiding the interaction with the same principles she had relied on throughout her career: clarity, patience, and unwavering composure. One officer finally spoke directly to her, his tone now fully respectful. "Ma'am, we apologize for the confusion. We understand now. Thank you for your patience and cooperation." She nodded once, her expression neutral but firm. "Thank you for handling this carefully," she replied. "My child and I appreciate it." Her voice carried a quiet authority, the kind that commands respect without demanding it. She had turned suspicion into understanding, tension into calm, all through patience, composure, and truth. The crowd began to disperse slowly, some still whispering, others shaking their heads in disbelief at what they had witnessed. She remained focused on her child, gently guiding them back toward the car. Every step was measured, deliberate, reinforcing the sense of control and safety. Her child's small hand stayed firmly in hers, and she offered a soft smile. "We're okay now," she said. "Everything is fine." The officers returned her documents and allowed her to retrieve her child safely. She buckled them back into the car, careful to move slowly and deliberately. The officers watched but no longer questioned or challenged her. She could feel the relief settle in, though she stayed alert, knowing that the world could shift quickly. She glanced back once, meeting the eyes of the senior officer. There was a quiet acknowledgement there, a mutual understanding that the situation had been handled carefully and correctly. As she started the engine and drove away, her child chattered softly, still processing what had happened. She listened, smiled, and responded, keeping the mood calm and light. Inside, she felt a mixture of relief and exhaustion. The encounter had tested every ounce of her training, patience, and composure. Yet she had navigated it successfully, protecting her child, asserting her authority, and maintaining calm in a situation that had begun as potentially dangerous and unfair. For the first time that morning, she allowed herself a deep, steady breath. She had turned what could have been a frightening, chaotic event into a demonstration of control, courage, and clarity. And in doing so, she had taught her child one of the most important lessons of all: that composure, patience, and truth could transform even the most tense moments into something manageable, safe, and ultimately empowering. The tension of the morning had slowly started to ease, though the memory of it lingered in her mind like a shadow. Even as she drove away from the scene, the weight of what had happened pressed against her chest. Her hands gripped the steering wheel a little tighter than usual, and she felt the adrenaline slowly ebbing, leaving a mix of relief and lingering unease. Her child sat quietly in the back seat, eyes wide and thoughtful, not fully understanding the seriousness of the encounter, but aware that something important had just happened. She stole a glance in the rear-view mirror, watching their small face, and felt a wave of gratitude and love. "It's okay now," she said softly, more to herself than to them. "Everything is okay." She had navigated the encounter with patience, composure, and authority, but she knew that the world outside didn't always move according to reason. Biases, misunderstandings, and assumptions could turn ordinary moments into extraordinary challenges. She had faced many difficult situations in her career, but this one had been personal. It had involved her child, her family, and the delicate balance of authority and protection she worked to maintain every day. As they drove through the streets, she began reflecting on what had happened. It was one thing to handle tense situations in her professional life, in controlled environments with colleagues and protocols. It was another entirely to manage them in the open world, where assumptions and biases could cloud judgment and escalate quickly. The officers had acted on what they believed they saw, without taking the time to fully understand the context. And while her revelation as an FBI agent had shifted the situation, she couldn't ignore the fact that her appearance, her status as a single black mother, had played a role in the initial escalation. Her mind ran through the details, replaying the encounter like a slow-motion film. Each gesture, each word, each pause carried meaning. She realized how close things had come to becoming chaotic, how easily a single misstep could have escalated. She thought about the officers' uncertainty, their change in tone, and the subtle respect that had finally emerged. It had been a delicate dance, one she had navigated with precision, relying on years of training, experience, and instinct. She had maintained control, protected her child, and ensured the situation ended without harm. But the experience left her with a renewed awareness of the challenges she faced daily, not just in her professional life, but in the world at large. Her child, still quiet, finally spoke. "Mom, why did they think you were bad?" The question was innocent, yet it carried the weight of a harsh reality. She smiled softly, reaching back to take their hand. "Sometimes people make quick judgments," she said gently. "They see things through their own eyes, not always understanding the full picture. But what matters is how we handle it. We stayed calm, we stayed safe, and we handled everything the right way." Her words were simple, but they held a lesson she hoped her child would carry for life. That composure, patience, and understanding could be powerful tools, even in moments of fear or misunderstanding. As the day went on, she returned home, settling into the quiet of her apartment with her child by her side. The familiar surroundings brought comfort, a stark contrast to the tension of the morning. She made a cup of coffee, taking a moment to breathe and reflect, letting the warmth seep into her hands and chest. Her child busied themselves with toys, still processing the day, and she watched them with a soft smile, marveling at their resilience and trust. She knew that children often see things more clearly than adults. They sense fear, tension, and calm with equal intensity. Her child had remained composed because she had guided them, and in that, she felt a small victory amidst the lingering unease. Later, as she settled into her work, she began making calls and sending emails, starting the process of accountability. Her training had taught her the importance of documenting incidents, ensuring that every detail was recorded accurately. She described the events to her colleagues, outlining the officer's actions, her responses, and the eventual resolution. She spoke calmly and clearly, emphasizing facts over emotion, though the memory of fear and tension remained close to her chest. Her colleagues listened, offering support and guidance, understanding the delicate balance of professional and personal stakes involved. She reflected on the broader implications of what had happened. The incident was more than a personal encounter. It was a reflection of systemic challenges, of assumptions made too quickly, and of the power dynamics that existed in society. She thought about the officers not with anger but with understanding. Many of them acted from fear, from training, from the assumptions they carried. The challenge was not just individual but structural, and recognizing that helped her frame the experience in a broader context. It did not excuse their actions, but it offered a lens through which to understand why such situations occurred so frequently. Her child, sensing the lingering tension in the room, climbed onto her lap and hugged her tightly. "Mom, I'm glad you're okay," they said softly. She hugged them back, feeling the warmth of their trust and love. "I'm okay," she replied gently. We're both okay, and we handled it together." The moment was quiet but profound. In her child's eyes, she saw admiration, trust, and the beginnings of understanding the complexities of the world. She realized that the lessons of the day extended beyond personal safety. They were lessons in resilience, composure, and integrity. The next day, she received a call from the local police department requesting a formal meeting. They wanted to understand the incident from her perspective, to review their procedures, and to address the misjudgment that had occurred. She agreed, seeing it as an opportunity to advocate for change. She prepared carefully, documenting every detail, anticipating questions, and reflecting on how to communicate clearly and effectively. She approached the meeting not with anger or blame, but with a focus on accountability, education, and prevention. When she arrived at the meeting, she was greeted with cautious respect. The officers involved were present, their demeanor subdued, their expressions showing a mix of regret and attentiveness. She spoke calmly, outlining the events, emphasizing the importance of professional conduct, unbiased assessment, and the critical need to consider context in every encounter. Her voice carried authority, not just because of her credentials, but because of her composure, clarity, and unwavering commitment to truth. The officers listened, asking questions for clarification, and she answered each one with precision, ensuring that her points were understood. As the discussion continued, she reflected internally on the balance she maintained throughout the incident. Her ability to navigate a tense situation had not relied solely on authority or credentials. It had relied on patience, composure, empathy, and awareness. She understood that human interactions were complex, often driven by assumptions and biases, and that effective communication could transform conflict into understanding. The officers' responses indicated they were beginning to see the situation from a new perspective, recognizing how their actions had been influenced by assumptions rather than facts. The meeting concluded with an agreement to implement additional training for the officers, focusing on bias recognition, communication skills, and safe interaction protocols. She left the station feeling a mixture of relief and cautious optimism. The incident had been a test, a moment of high tension and potential danger, but it had also created an opportunity for growth, reflection, and positive change. She knew that systemic change would take time, but every small step mattered. Her voice, her presence, and her calm authority had made a difference. Back at home, she reflected once more on the day's events. She thought about the officers, the bystanders, her child, and herself. Each perspective offered a different understanding, a different lesson. She understood that the world could be unpredictable and unfair, but she also recognized the power of composure, patience, and clear communication. She had turned a moment of potential danger into one of learning and growth, not just for herself but for everyone involved. Her child, sensing the reflective mood, snuggled close. "Mom, I want to be brave like you," they said softly. She smiled, hugging them tightly. "You already are," she replied. "Being brave isn't just about standing up to danger. It's about staying calm, thinking clearly, and doing the right thing even when it's hard. You've already seen that today, and you did it too." Her words were simple, but they carried the depth of experience and wisdom she hoped to instill in her child. As the evening settled, she allowed herself a rare moment of quiet reflection. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the room, and the city outside seemed to slow down. She thought about the lessons learned, the challenges faced, and the resilience required to navigate a world that often judged too quickly. She knew that the morning's events would stay with her for a long time, not as a source of fear, but as a reminder of the strength, composure, and clarity required to face life's unpredictable moments. She also thought about the future, about how she could use her experience to help others. She considered community programs, educational initiatives, and advocacy efforts that could teach young people and adults alike the importance of understanding, patience, and calm decision-making. The incident had highlighted vulnerabilities, but it had also revealed opportunities. She was determined to turn this experience into something meaningful, something that could prevent similar misunderstandings from escalating in the future. The child yawned, curling up beside her. She wrapped an arm around them, feeling the warmth and trust that had carried her through the day. "Sleep well," she whispered. "Tomorrow is a new day, and we've already handled so much together. You're safe, and we're both strong." In that quiet moment, she felt a sense of accomplishment, not from the recognition of others, but from knowing she had guided, protected, and led with integrity and courage. The days after the incident carried a mix of normal routine and quiet reflection. Life slowly returned to its usual rhythm, but nothing felt quite the same. She woke early, prepared breakfast for her child, and got them ready for school with the same careful attention she always gave. Yet beneath the familiar motions, she carried a new awareness of the world, a deeper understanding of how quickly misunderstandings could escalate, and how much calm, patience, and clarity could change outcomes. Her child, still processing the events, asked questions with a quiet curiosity. "Mom, why did they look at us like that?" they asked one morning while they packed their backpack. She smiled gently, brushing a strand of hair from their face. "Sometimes people act on what they assume instead of what they know," she said. "They see only a small part of the story and make judgments. That is why we have to stay calm, careful, and clear. That way we can keep ourselves safe and handle whatever comes our way." Her words were simple yet meaningful. She wanted her child to understand that courage wasn't just about physical strength or authority. It was about composure, clarity, and integrity in difficult situations. Even at work, the memory of the encounter lingered. Colleagues often asked if she was okay, expressing concern for what had happened. She reassured them, keeping her composure. But the experience had reminded her of the fragility of daily life. She realized that many people faced similar challenges every day. Moments of judgment, bias, or misunderstanding that could escalate quickly if not handled carefully. Her experience had been unusual, yes, but the lessons it carried were universal. She could take what she had learned and apply it not just to her own life, but to the guidance she gave others. In her downtime, she began to plan ways to turn the experience into something meaningful. She reached out to her professional network, discussing training programs and awareness campaigns for law enforcement and communities alike. She wanted to use her voice and experience to prevent similar situations from happening to others. It was not just about accountability. It was about education, understanding, and fostering empathy. She believed that small changes in how people perceived and interacted with others could have far-reaching effects. Her child listened with wide eyes as she explained some of the ideas she was considering. "Mom, can we teach them not to be scared of people like us?" they asked earnestly. She laughed softly, hugging them close. "Yes," she said. "We can help people understand, and we can show them how important it is to treat everyone fairly and respectfully. That's part of the work I do, and now it's part of the lessons we share at home, too." She knew that teaching empathy and understanding began at home, and the child's awareness, even at a young age, was a powerful reminder of how change could start small. As weeks passed, she noticed subtle changes around her. Some neighbors who had witnessed the incident approached her, expressing admiration and respect. "I can't believe what you handled that day," one said quietly. "You stayed calm and you protected your child so well." She smiled, nodding politely, but she didn't dwell on praise. For her, the real victory was in knowing that she had turned a dangerous, stressful moment into an opportunity for learning and reflection. The recognition was secondary to the lesson she carried forward. She also maintained a dialogue with the local police department. There were follow-up meetings, reviews, and discussions about procedures, communication, and bias awareness. She remained professional, calm, and collaborative, offering insights from her perspective and experiences. Her approach was firm but respectful, emphasizing solutions rather than blame. She understood that systemic change required cooperation and dialogue, and she was committed to using her experience to make a positive impact. Every conversation was an opportunity to teach, to encourage understanding, and to advocate for safe, respectful interactions in the future. Through it all, she remained grounded in her life as a single mother. She continued to manage school routines, household tasks, and the small, ordinary responsibilities that often went unnoticed, but were the backbone of her daily life. She knew that strength wasn't only in professional achievements or authority. It was also in the consistency, love, and care she provided for her child every day. They were her priority, and every action she took, every lesson she taught was guided by the desire to create a safe, nurturing environment for them to grow. One evening, as they settled in after a long day, her child looked up at her with thoughtful eyes. "Mom, do you think people will remember what you did?" they asked. She smiled softly, brushing their hair back. "Some will," she said. "But what matters most is that we remember it ourselves. We learned something important, and we can use it to make better choices in the future. That's what really lasts." Her child nodded, absorbing the words, and she felt a quiet pride in the way they were learning to navigate the world with thoughtfulness, awareness, and empathy. The months that followed brought more opportunities for her to influence change. She spoke at local community gatherings, sharing her experience in a way that emphasized understanding, calm decision-making, and empathy. Her story resonated with people, both young and old, who had experienced moments of judgment or bias themselves. She emphasized that courage was not about confrontation, but about maintaining composure, thinking clearly, and standing up for what was right, even in small, everyday ways. People listened, asked questions, and left with a renewed perspective on how to interact with others more thoughtfully and respectfully. At work, she continued to excel, balancing demanding responsibilities with her role as a mother. Her colleagues admired her professionalism, her calm under pressure, and her ability to turn challenging situations into opportunities for learning and growth. She became a source of guidance and mentorship, not just for procedural matters, but for how to handle difficult human interactions with integrity and patience. Her reputation grew not through force or authority, but through the quiet power of her composure, insight, and dedication to doing what was right. She also noticed changes in her own perspective. The incident had taught her the fragility of assumptions and the importance of patience and empathy in everyday interactions. She became more conscious of how she approached people, how she interpreted actions and words, and how she could influence situations through calm, thoughtful responses. The experience had strengthened her, not just in her professional life, but in her personal life as well. She carried herself with renewed confidence, aware of the power of composure and clarity in navigating the world. Her child continued to grow, learning by example. They watched how she handled challenges, how she remained calm in the face of stress, and how she advocated for what was right with respect and clarity. In quiet moments, they would ask questions about the events of that morning, and she would answer honestly, explaining the importance of staying calm, thinking clearly, and maintaining integrity. Through these conversations, she instilled lessons that would last a lifetime. Lessons about courage, patience, and the quiet strength that comes from being aware, prepared, and thoughtful. Occasionally, she would reflect privately on the morning of the incident, the sudden fear, the tension, and the uncertainty. She remembered how quickly assumptions had escalated the situation, and how her composure had shifted the outcome. It reminded her of the responsibility she carried every day, not just for her child, but for the way she interacted with the world. She had learned that actions, words, and presence mattered, sometimes more than credentials, authority, or experience. Even small gestures could influence perceptions, diffuse tension, and create understanding. One sunny afternoon, she and her child went to the park, enjoying the simple pleasures of laughter, play, and freedom. They ran across the grass, chasing each other, carefree in a way that made her heart swell with love and pride. For a moment, the world felt entirely safe and uncomplicated, and in that simplicity, she felt a deep sense of accomplishment. She had protected her child, navigated danger with composure, and turned a potentially harmful experience into a lesson in patience, courage, and empathy. As the sun began to set, she watched her child climb a small hill silhouetted against the warm light. She felt a quiet pride and satisfaction, knowing that her actions had shaped not just their safety but their understanding of the world. Courage, she realized, was not always about dramatic heroism. It was about steady, consistent, calm decisions in the face of uncertainty. It was about teaching, guiding, and modeling the right behavior for those who looked up to you. Her phone buzzed with messages from colleagues and community members, thanking her for her insights, her guidance, and her willingness to turn a personal challenge into a source of learning for others. She smiled, grateful for the opportunity to make a difference. She had turned what could have been a negative, stressful moment into a chance to educate, inspire, and strengthen both her community and herself. And she knew that this was just the beginning. Every day offered new opportunities to apply the lessons she had learned, to teach her child and to make the world a little better through patience, clarity, and empathy. As night fell, she tucked her child into bed, reading a story and listening to their soft breathing. She kissed their forehead, whispering, "You're safe and we're strong. Always remember that." She lingered in the doorway for a moment, reflecting on the journey she had navigated, the lessons she had learned, and the growth she had achieved. Life was unpredictable, yes, But she had discovered the power of composure, clarity, and resilience in facing its challenges. Finally, she sat quietly in the living room, sipping a warm drink, letting the day's events settle in her mind. She felt a sense of peace and accomplishment, knowing that she had faced fear, tension, and misunderstanding with integrity and calm. She had taught her child invaluable lessons about courage and patience, advocated for change in her community, and grown stronger in the process. The experience had transformed her, not by changing the world around her, but by revealing the power within herself to navigate it with grace, clarity, and unwavering determination.